Hi, Namaste students. I am Basavaraj Bilgi, Assistant Professor of English, GFGC Ergatti. Today's topic of discussion is Mending Wall, a poem written by Robert Frost. Before going to read the poem, we will see some of the points about the poet, then we will go on reading the poem. Robert Lee Frost was born in 1874 and died in 1963. He was an American poet. His work was initially published in England before it was published in America. He is known for his realistic depictions of rural life and his command of American colloquial speech. Frost frequently wrote about settings from rural life in New England in the early 20th century, using them to examine complex social and philosophical themes. Now we will read the poem line by line and we'll try to understand what is happening in the poem. Mending Wall. Something there is that doesn't love a wall, that sends the frozen ground swell under it and spills the upper boulders in the sun and makes gaps even two can pass abreast. The work of hunters is another thing. Here in the first stanza, the poet is talking about some supernatural power. He says, there is something which doesn't love a wall. Then who loves building wall? According to the poet, we the human beings love wall, but there is some power in nature which doesn't love the wall, but we love the walls and it doesn't love. And he says, the frozen ground swells under it. When we build a wall, the frozen ground swells under it. Swell, SWELL, swell means bhav. Swell under it and spills the upper boulders in the sun. We have built the wall by using boulders, and those boulders are fallen apart because of the frozen ground which swells under the wall and makes gaps even two can pass abreast. Those gaps are as big as two people can pass through them. The work of hunters is another thing. And I think that he says hunters are another reason for the destruction of the wall. The poet says, I have come after them and made repair where they have left not one stone on a stone, but they would have the rabbit out of hiding to please the yelping dogs. He says, I have come after them and made repair. This man came searching those holes and he repaired those holes in the wall time and again. And he says, there is no stone which is left on a stone. And why they are removed, why the stones are removed? Because the hunters want to catch the rabbits which hide in the wall. And when they are taking out those rabbits, they remove the stones and they spill those boulders to the either side of the wall. They catch those rabbits by using their dogs, yelping dogs, he says. Yelp, YELP means barking dogs. Bogaluva ನಾಯಿಗಳು. those hunters take dogs for hunting, and those dogs, when they see a rabbit passing through the wall, they go there, and when they are trying to catch that rabbit, the stones fall to the other side, he says. And he says it is he who repairs those walls. Every year he searches the gaps and repairs. But remember this, and we will have some more discussion about that later. The gaps, I mean, no one has seen them made or heard them made, but at spring mending time we find them there. He says, the gaps, I mean, no one has seen them made. No one is able to see those gaps or heard them made. But at spring mending time, we find them there. He is somewhat confused. Throughout the year, we do not find those gaps, but and also we do not hear anybody making those gaps. But in the springtime, when it is springtime, we find them there. They appear suddenly, he says. And he is using some mysterious language here. Mysterious, he is creating some suspense. I let my neighbor know beyond the hill, and on a day we meet to walk the line and set the wall between us once again. See, here in these lines, we come to know who searched those gaps first. The speaker himself searched those gaps and went to meet his neighbor to inform him that the wall is broken and it is right time to build the wall. All these things are said by the speaker. But in later parts of the poem, the speaker skillfully, intelligently turns the table and calls the neighbor as savage. But who did find those gaps? It is speaker who had found them, who had searched them. We keep the wall between us as we go. See, the speaker says, we both mend the wall as we walk through the wall. To each the boulders that have fallen to each. To each the boulders that have fallen to each. The boulders which were on top of the wall are fallen to the each side. The neighbor picks up the boulders which are fallen on his ground, and he keeps them, and the speaker picks up the boulders which are there in his field, and he pick them and put those boulders on the wall. Here we can refer this line to a Greek mythological character called Sisyphus. Sisyphus was cursed by the gods, and he was left with a boulder, and what he was supposed to do is he has to push that boulder to the top of the hill. But when he pushes that boulder to the top, it again falls to the other side. And when he brings the same boulder from the other side, that boulder will fall to the other side. This is where we can relate the Sisyphean story to this poem. The speaker says, to each the boulders that have fallen to each, he says, the boulders have fallen on both the sides, and they keep them in springtime. They keep them in right place in springtime. But once again, the when after some times, once again they find gaps there. So the wall they are building will not be permanent. It is like the boulder in the hands of Sisyphus, and indirectly the poet might be telling that we, the human beings, all of us are cursed with the Sisyphean burden. That's what he might be saying. And some are loaves and some so nearly balls, we have to use a spell to make them balance. See, Sisyphus pushes that boulder to the top of the hill, and if he doesn't stop it sensitively on the top of the hill, it will fall to the other side. Once again, he has to carry that, he has to push that boulder to the top. Here the speaker says, we there are some round shaped stones, there are some loaves, there are some square stones, and when we are putting those uh, stones like ball like stones, we have to use a spell to make them balance. The balancing act is very important in the poem. He says, stay where you are until our backs are turned. We wear our fingers rough with handling them. He says, when they are going back, when if they look at their hands, they are very rough, their fingers are rough, they are broken, and they might be bleeding because of those boulders, those stones. Oh, just another kind of outdoor game. One on a side. It comes to little more. He says it is a kind of outdoor game for me every year. Sisyphus also, the same work is repeated by Sisyphus. Here the speaker is also repeating the same work. It comes to little more there where it is we do not need the wall. He says, very often when I am sitting alone, I think why we need a wall between me and my neighbor, the speaker says. And he says, he is all pine and I am apple orchard. My apple trees will never get across and eat the cones under his pines, I tell him. The speaker says, we do not grow same crops, neither, nor do we have cows on our farms. Then why we need a wall? Then why we need a fence? The speaker says. But who informed the neighbor about the mending time? It is speaker himself. He is uh, uh, he is revealing his own personality through the words which he uses. First, he says, first I search for the gaps in the wall in springtime. Then I go to meet my neighbor to inform him that there are gaps in the wall, and it is he who sets a date to repair the wall. But now he is trying to show himself as a rational being by telling the reader that why we need a wall when we don't have cows here, when I am growing a different kind of crop and he is growing a different kind of crop, and he says my trees will not go to his field and eat his fruits, then why we need the wall, he says. Say, but neighbor says, he only says, good fences make good neighbors. Spring is the mischief in me, and I wonder if I could put a notion in his head. When the speaker tells his neighbor that I am growing different crop and you are growing different crop, and we need not a wall between us. The speaker says what the neighbor used to tell: good fences make good neighbors, are the words of the neighbor. But then the speaker says, spring is the mischief in me, and I wonder if I could put a notion in his head. The speaker is deliberately trying to uh, picturize the neighbor as unintelligent, ignorant, and uneducated person, and barbaric or savage. The speaker is trying to do all these things. He is trying to create a image of the neighbor which we the readers may think that the neighbor is very savage, uneducated. But in reality, speaker himself went to the neighbor and informed him that there are gaps and it is time to mend the wall. See how the speaker is revealing his own personality, revealing his own characteristics by when we read the poem, we come to know all those things. Why do they make good neighbors? Isn't it where there are cows, but there are no cows? See, before I build a wall, I would ask to know what I was walling in or walling out. When the neighbor says good fences make good neighbors, the speaker asks the neighbor, why do they make good neighbors? Isn't it where there are cows? But here there are no cows. The speaker here makes an intelligent comment. He says, when we don't have cows here, we need not a wall. Wall is in need somewhere where there are cows. That means the speaker himself is lover of the wall, but he picturizes the neighbor as a old fashioned, savage, uneducated, and a person who believes in traditional beliefs. But here the speaker himself is blindfolded person. He says we don't have need of wall here because we don't have cows, but walls are must according to speaker where there are cows. So I think you might have got it. And he also says, uh, before I built a wall, I would ask to know what I was walling in or walling out. He expresses his confusion whether I am building a wall or destroying it. The entire poem runs on two key words. One is destruction, another one is creation. Remember. And to whom I was like to give offense, something there is that doesn't love a wall. There is something that doesn't love a wall, but I love the wall, he says. That wants it down, I could say, yells to him. But it's not yells exactly, and I would rather he said it for himself. He says, the speaker says, no, my dear friend, there is something in this nature that doesn't love a wall. That's why the wall we build every year will be collapsing. But the speaker says, no, elves exactly not. No, 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 no. There is no power. No, there is no such power in nature. The neighbor says. And he said it for himself. I see him there bringing a stone grasped firmly by the top in each hand, like an old stone savage armed. The poet here is completely using a language which can diminute the neighbor, the character of the neighbor, but indirectly he is revealing his own character, his own personality. Who went to the neighbor? He himself went. And who is willing to build the wall, and who is doing all this talking about the wall, about the destruction, about the creation, about the timing of the building wall? It is the speaker himself. These are all the things which are there in his mind, and he is expressing them. He says, I see him there, bringing a stone grasped firmly by the top in each hand, like an old stone savage armed. The speaker is standing from a distance. He is looking at the neighbor, and he is holding two stones in his hand. And when he comes, the old man, the neighbor, looks like as if he is a old stone savage person who is armed with the stone made weapons. He moves in darkness, as it seems to me, not of woods only and the shade of trees. He will not go behind his father's saying, and he likes having thought of it so well. The neighbor moves under the shade of the trees, but that seems to the speaker as if the neighbor is moving into darkness, not of woods only and the shade of trees. Even though he is moving under the shade of the trees, it doesn't look like so. It seems as if he is moving into darkness. Darkness means ignorance. He will not go behind his father saying. The speaker passes a comment that the neighbor will not think beyond his father's saying, and he likes having thought of it so well. He says again, good pences make good neighbors. At the end also, at the end of the poem also, the neighbor says, good pences make good neighbors. This is how the poem ends. But here I have another comment to make, that the poem is about the creativity power, creation, destruction, and the poet or Robert Frost is indirectly trying to tell how writing process takes place. And, it is not so easy. He uses a word called spell. We have to use spell to balance those stones sometimes, he says. So it is a balancing act, and it is creation, it is destruction, and it is some creating something new. And the poem talks about nature and the power of nature, and in contrast it talks about the mentality of human beings. We want to build the wall, but the nature wants to destroy the wall. Here, actually, as per my understanding, the speaker himself is savage, but he wants to prove that he is good and his neighbor is bad. He is not willing to build the wall, but the neighbor is willing to build the wall. And this man is a broad minded person, and his neighbor is a narrow minded person. And we can make a reference to our Rabindranath Tagore here. According to Rabindranath Tagore, we have to become universal. And here in this poem, the speaker is trying to picturize himself as a universal person, and he is trying to picturize his neighbor as uneducated and a very traditional person, and he himself wants to show as a modern person, but there is contradictions, and the speaker himself is uneducated, traditional, superstitious, old model person as per my understanding. And I also brought in the story of Sisyphus, wherein Sisyphus is trying to do the same thing again and again as the speaker and the neighbor are doing in this present poem. Thank you very much. I hope you will get some of the important things from the poem. Thank you very much. Please join with me in another class. Thank you.